popping in and joining us. But I wanted to get started to be conscientious of your time. So hello to all, especially those who I haven't met. My name is Jackie Decision. My pronouns are she, her. I am a credentialed advocate, and I work at Tennessee Tech as the Project Awaken coordinator. I want to warn you, you might have seen something just pop up on your screen. We are going to record today's session just for folks who wanted to join us but were unable. It will not be just publicly available. It will only be available by request. But I want to warn you, so if you have your video showing, it might show up. If you just have your camera off and your name, it shouldn't show up on the Zoom at all. I have the pleasure today of presenting with my wonderful colleague, Erin. So I'll let Erin introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So yes, my name is Erin and my pronouns are she, her. I am the Assistant Project Coordinator for Project Awaken at Tennessee Tech, and I am also in the MSW program at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. If you have any questions during this program, please feel free to use the chat. And we do understand that these are really sensitive subjects and they can impact some of the folks on the training. So the most important thing to us is that you take care of yourself. So if you need to walk away for a few minutes or leave the program at any time, please feel free to do so. And I am going to paste into the chat here some resources for you all. Here we go. Is that showing up?
Giving us some resources. Today we're going to use a tool called Peer Deck. And this is really because we think that workshops are one of the best ways to learn, so that we can all practice and engage together. But I also know that a lot of folks hate talking on Zoom because it's so awkward sometimes. So we have this great tool. If you're a faculty member, you might love to check out this tool called Peer Deck. But I'm going to have everyone join our virtual classroom, and it will allow you to type in responses at certain points. So there's two ways you can join. You can either use the direct link I just put in the chat, or you can open your phone or another browser on your computer and go to joinpd.com. And then you're going to type in that code. That code is ADNYCZ. And this will again allow you to participate with us, and it will keep your responses anonymous. Your name will not be near them. So I really love that, especially when we're learning, so that we're not worried that oh, everyone's going to know what I said. So I also want to remind you, in the reminder email that had the Zoom link for today, the one that I initially said we were meeting at 9:30 p.m. So I'm so glad that y'all made it here. I'm sorry for that mishap. But in that email, there's a guided note sheet. This was made by request for previous trainings I've done. Some folks have said it's really helpful to have a sheet that's what are the important things I should get out of this. So if that's something that's helpful for you, feel free to use it. If not, feel free to disregard. Just wanted to remind you it's there if that will be a good resource for you. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get rolling.
So a little bit about us. Project Awaken is a grant-funded program on the campus of Tennessee Tech, and we are dedicated to the belief that no one should experience sexual assault, domestic dating violence, or stalking. So Project Awaken works to eliminate violence from happening, and we train bystanders on active interventions. And we also help to improve professional responses to survivors on campus and also in the community. And we also serve as an empowering confidential resource for survivors. Unfortunately, our grant is ending at the end of August, so we won't be on Tech campus after August 30th. But survivors will still be able to get support at the Tech Counseling Center or on their 24/7 Eagle Eye hotline after Awaken ends. So first, we're going to talk about what is power-based violence. So we use this umbrella term, power-based violence, at Project Awaken, and it refers to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. The reason we use that term is because what all of these have in common is that they are all about power and control. So a lot of what we do at Project Awaken is educational programs on campus, and these programs serve to help students understand what power-based violence is, what it looks like, and what are interventions to help stop violence and to support survivors. Many people think college students will already know the definitions of each of these forms of violence, but it was very surprising to me at first when I first started working here, just how unaware many students really are about these issues. So we are going to start the presentation by talking through the actual definitions of each of these forms of violence, because we're anticipating that you may have to do some education with your students to help them understand. So also, while we're talking through these definitions, if you could please try to think about what misconceptions you think your students may have about these different kinds of power-based violence, and we'll circle back to that afterwards.
So first of all, we're going to talk about the definition of sexual assault. So, of course, the definition is a two-part definition, both at Awaken federally and through tech policy. So the first part of that definition has to do with any unwanted touching to a private area. We often have to remind students that there are several private areas, not just one. So private area would include breast, butt, and genitals. So it could be unwanted penetration, but sexual assault, of course, could be unwanted touching, but sexual assault, of course, can also be unwanted penetration. We often have to remind students that there's many different ways that unwanted penetration can happen. It could happen orally, anally, vaginally, or with an object. So unfortunately, this does happen on our campus. We work with sexual assault survivors often. Typically, when we've worked with a sexual assault survivor at Tennessee Tech, almost always the sexual assault was perpetrated by someone that the person knew and trusted. A friend, an acquaintance, a classmate, someone that they knew and trusted. And it often happened in a social setting and was facilitated by coercion, force, or drugs or alcohol. So we'll often see that maybe a survivor was pressured or manipulated into having sex, which of course, if their original answer wasn't yes, then that wasn't consent. But we'll often see that a perpetrator will use alcohol or drugs to put somebody into a vulnerable situation so that they can take advantage. So typically that's alcohol, but we also have worked with survivors who have been dosed with a drug called GHB, which incapacitates them, makes them seem really intoxicated really fast, and it makes it incredibly hard for survivors to remember what has happened. So unfortunately, these things do happen on our campus, and it's almost always happening in these social settings with drugs and alcohol as a tool to hurt somebody.
So domestic and dating violence is another form of power-based violence. We define that as a pattern of abusive behaviors by one partner over the other in order to maintain power and control over that person. So here on the slide, you can see we have an image of the power and control wheel. Some of you may be familiar with this image already. Please notice that it includes not only sexual abuse and physical abuse, but also emotional abuse and economic abuse. Another form of abuse that we see often on college campuses, including here at Tech, is academic abuse. And this can include things like starting a huge fight with a partner before an exam, or erasing an important paper off a partner's computer before they can submit it, or maybe sabotaging a partner's application so they can't go away to graduate school. So again, this is all about getting power and control over that other person. And abusers may do this to sabotage someone's academic career so that they can gain more control or more power over them. The definition of stalking that we use is on the slide here. The important piece to recognize about this definition is that the conduct would have to make a reasonable person feel uncomfortable. So ultimately, survivors who report have to demonstrate that the conduct of the other person who's stalking them is unreasonable. So when a student does disclose to us that they are being stalked, we use a helpful intervention, which is called an unwanted contact log. And this doesn't have to be anything really formal. We just ask them to write down the date, time, and place of when the person that is stalking them shows up where they are. And this will help to establish a pattern of unreasonable behavior. So again, this could just be written on a piece of paper, in a spiral notebook. It could be typed up on paper or in a Google Calendar or Google Docs. Or you can find formal contact log templates online that can be printed. Also, if the perpetrator is repeatedly calling, texting, or emailing the victim, we do ask them to screenshot or print the messages, and also to save any voicemails. And this can be added to the evidence showing that they are being stalked. This can be especially helpful if they do choose to apply for a protection order. And of course, something we spend a lot of time on addressing at Awaken is consent. You can see there on the slide the definition. Graphics we found can be really helpful in getting ideas across to students. You can see there on the slide that we have this image for FRIES. We really love this one. FRIES stands for, it means that consent is freely given, it's reversible, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and specific.
So hopefully you remembered your homework during that, which is to the whole time be thinking, I know these things, but do my students know these things? And Erin and I have interacted with a lot of students who really don't know what each of these forms of violence look like. So we're going to practice using Pear Deck. So if you're on your phone, a green box should be popping up in the bottom right corner that you'll click answer and then you can type. If you're on your computer, there should be a text box appearing to the right. But I'd like you to use that text box and type in, what misconceptions do you anticipate that your students may have about these forms of power-based violence? So you can choose all three, you can write about one. Are there myths that the students would buy into? Do they really understand the definition? Do they think that certain things don't count as abuse? Go ahead and I'll give you a minute to type in what misconceptions you anticipate folks on our campus might have. If anyone's having trouble getting connected, I'm going to send it one more time in the chat too. So if you're still typing, take your time, but we're going to go ahead and start peeking at what some folks on the call have said. So we have, this one looks done. So students might anticipate that sexual assault is committed by strangers and that coerced consent is consent. Absolutely. A lot of students think that, you know, a stranger jumps out of the bushes and grabs you and that's how sexual assault happens. And of course that can happen, but statistically speaking, about 85% of the time, folks usually know the person who's hurting them when it comes to sexual assault. So absolutely, they might not know that. A lot of students don't understand coercion at all, so totally. And this person said, not understanding that certain things under domestic violence are violence. Absolutely. Especially if people aren't being physically hurt. Sometimes they think, well, they're not hitting me, so it's not abuse, right? So not understanding that there are many different ways that violence or abuse can happen in a relationship. Academic abuse, absolutely. This person says, I like the inclusion of the word enthusiastic in the FRIES acronym. Absolutely. So students need to know that consent is someone giving their yes because they want to engage, not because they feel like they have to or that somebody's going to be mad at them if they say no. Consent has to be, yes, we're all here because we want to be here. We're all cool with what's happening. Absolutely. So this person says, I think some students may feel awkward about discussing sex. Absolutely. I've gotten told that a lot, like, well, if you ask for consent, that kills the mood or that kills the vibe. So education around that these things should be normal and that they're healthy and that it's a good thing to make sure that everyone is cool with what's happening and that it doesn't have to be robotic and awkward. You can be checking in as a normal and healthy part of a sex life, right? So we partly did this because folks, people don't understand these things on our campus. So it's common that in your classrooms, in your workplaces, in your office, you might hear people say victim blaming things or saying things that just aren't true about domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sexual assault. So part of our role at the university for all of us is to educate our students. And so if you hear these things, something that we can all start doing today is educating students about what these issues actually look like and that they are never the survivor's fault. Okay, so you could do this every day in your classroom, but you also might need to do this if someone chooses to disclose to you. It is incredibly common for victims of power-based violence to blame themselves. So I can almost guarantee that if someone discloses to you, you will hear them blame themselves at some point. They might say something like, well, I shouldn't have gone to that party. I shouldn't have dated this person. I shouldn't have given them my phone number. So it is always appropriate to say something like, I hear you blaming yourself, but I want you to know that this is not your fault, okay? There are a lot of misconceptions and especially even victims might have them, okay? So how common are these issues? Fortunately, very common. So go ahead and look through the different statistics on the slide. The statistics that you're seeing are national statistics across the United States. Go ahead and use Pear Deck and let me know which one, if any, really stands out to you. You can tell us why, but you don't have to. It's just up to you. Start looking. Looks like some folks are still reading. I'm gonna go ahead and look. So I'm hearing a lot of people say that that 1 in 4 college women will be sexually assaulted is startling. Absolutely. I mean, I think all of us can picture a classroom of students, and to do that math in our head of how many of them might be victimized throughout their time is terrifying. Absolutely. Yeah, it looks like A is the one that's really standing out to this group. Absolutely. These things are happening. And unfortunately, I think a lot of students think, oh yeah, well that happens on big campuses or that happens in big cities. And they don't always recognize that that does happen in our community as well. We did a campus climate survey last spring, and the numbers at Tennessee Tech that we found were slightly lower, but nearly consistent with these national statistics. So these issues are happening on our campus. There are survivors in your classroom. So I'm so glad you're here because it's really important that we are all prepared to connect them to resources and to help them heal if they choose to tell us about their victimization experience.
So we know that you all were hired for the university because of your expertise in your field, but you were probably not hired because of your survivor advocacy abilities. So that being said, we also know that students do tend to view you as experts in everything. So you may have already experienced them coming to you for personal matters. So part of your role is student success, and we all need to support students to be successful, and we all need support to be successful. So part of your role is being an empathetic and trauma-informed employee. Again, you don't get to choose whether or not a student is going to disclose to you. You may receive a disclosure, you may not, but we don't know ahead of time whether someone's going to disclose to us or not. So it's really important to know how to receive that and what to do because it does impact the survivor's healing. In a recent study, 42% of faculty reported that they received a disclosure. So we all need to be ready and equipped to be able to respond appropriately. And we did find in the research that disclosures do happen equally across disciplines, across professor gender, and across the different types of power-based violence.
When we start talking about receiving a disclosure, normally I get people starting to panic. And usually they're panicking for 2 reasons. The first one is, oh my gosh, do I have to report this? So we're going to go back and in depth help you understand reporting obligations you might have and make sure that everyone really understands that. But the other piece that I hear people panic about is, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt this student, make it worse, right? So we're going to do an exercise to discuss what survivors may need during a disclosure. So I need all of you to think about a time where you experienced victimization. I'd encourage you to not think about power-based violence if that is in your past, but instead to think about something much lower stakes. So were you yelled at in school at one point? Were you scolded by a parent or guardian? Did you get a ticket that you didn't feel you deserved? So thinking of a time you experienced, shame, victimization, being called out, some uncomfortable, bad feeling experience. So conjure that experience up in your mind, and please use Pear Deck to answer 3 questions. Did you tell anyone? And if so, who? What did you need from that person you told? Or if you didn't tell, what could someone have done that might have helped? And third, what did you not need? I didn't need them to respond with this, emotion or feeling. So 3 questions about that experience. Did you tell? What did you need? What did you not need? No worries if you're still typing, but we're going to go ahead and start peeking. So when I'm looking just for one first, so some of the folks on our call did tell somebody. And if they did, they told a close friend, a best friend, or family member, or didn't tell anybody. Okay, so people either told no one or they told someone close to them who they trusted. Okay. 2, what did they need from people? So some folks needed legal help. Some folks needed somebody to listen to them. Absolutely. Needed to be left alone, so space, not somebody hovering. If someone had told, they said, I would have needed someone with a calm, reassuring voice, someone to listen. Absolutely. And then last, but of course not least, what we didn't need. So folks didn't need them to come up with a solution. So somebody didn't want this person to fix it for them. Same thing, somebody else was like, I didn't want someone to drop the ball. So somebody who didn't take it seriously, who didn't care. This person saying, I wouldn't have appreciated someone telling me it was my fault. Absolutely. So you didn't need a could or a should have. You didn't need to be shitted on, right? You didn't need somebody blaming you for it. The whole reason we did this exercise is to help y'all know survivors need the same things. So if someone chooses to tell you that they've experienced something like this, that says a tremendous amount about what they think about you. They are choosing to come to you because they look to you as a mentor, an expert, someone who will be there. And what they need is really what you all needed, somebody to listen, to provide support, to provide, somebody said legal help, so to provide resources to connect them to somebody else. But they don't need our advice. They don't need us to fix it for them. They don't need our blame or our judgment or our shame. So really our role, if someone discloses to us, is support and connecting to experts who can help them further.
So again, we talked about how students can tend to think of faculty and staff as experts in everything. So they may come to you about a lot of things outside of class business. So if they do choose to disclose to you, like we were just talking about, the most important thing is to listen and to not interrupt them. Sometimes it's really hard for students to tell someone and they need some time to talk it through. Try to be in the present moment with the student, and of course, respond with empathy. And some research that Jack and I came across while we were preparing for this presentation talked about how faculty and staff have said that they may benefit from mini scripts of what to say. So something that might work really well is to say something like, I am so sorry that this happened to you. I'm so glad that you reached out for support. You've been through so much and nobody should have to go through something like that. So really showing empathy and that you're listening and you're there for them. Your role, again, as Jack mentioned, it is when you receive a disclosure is immediate crisis intervention and referral. And we'll definitely get into talking about that. But before we do, we know that many people's first concern is the reporting obligation that they may have, if any. So before we talk about crisis intervention, we're going to go over Title IX and Clery reporting obligations with you all. So we do at Project Awaken always keep in mind that reporting power-based violence is a very deeply personal choice that only a survivor can make. On this slide, we do have an image about how to find help after experiencing an act of power-based violence. I believe Jack did get a PDF version of this to you, and we'll send another one. Okay, great. So on here, we have some things someone can do right after experiencing an act of power-based violence. Of course, go somewhere safe, seek medical attention, seek counseling, and of course, consider reporting. The incidences, if the victim would like to report, can typically be reported to university police or to the local police department. It really depends on where the incident took place. It must be reported in the jurisdiction where it happened. So if something happened on campus, it would be reported to the campus police. If something happened, say, down in Sparta at a party or in Cookeville in town, then it would be reported to the local police in that area. And then once a police report is made, it does trigger a criminal investigation. Getting a medical examination is recommended and it may help in a criminal investigation, but a person may report an incident without medical or forensic evidence. And a student may also report to the Title IX office here on campus. So we're going to get into what is Title IX. Some of you may know Greg Holt. He is our Title IX coordinator here at Tech. He's also the Clery coordinator and the compliance officer. He's a busy guy. He wasn't able to join us today to cover this part. So that said, we'll just go over it briefly with his blessing. So Title IX, as you may know, is a federal law that prohibits any person in the US from being discriminated against based on sex. This includes sexual harassment. So in Tech's policy, sexual harassment encompasses sexual assault, domestic and dating violence, and stalking. So how Title IX concerns are handled at Tech is outlined in Tech Policy 144. This policy was recently updated in August of 2020 as a result of new US Department of Education guidelines under the Trump administration. You may have heard about that. That was in the news quite a bit. We are anticipating that there might be some more changes with the new administration, but we're not sure when.
This stuff can get confusing, so please use the Zoom chat or mic up and ask questions, interrupt me at any time. So in the past, if a Title IX got a report, they might move forward with an investigation, even if the student didn't really want them to. So a lot of students were afraid of things being reported to Title IX. A really good change from this new policy update is that that is no longer the case. So if a student is impacted by these issues, they have the option to report to Title IX. So let's say that they told you and you decided to refer them to Title IX. We could call Greg or we could call Greg together. So Greg, the Title IX coordinator, would receive notice about the experience and he would contact the victim, who is called in their proceedings the complainant, okay? And he would explain the Title IX process and offer supportive measures. And at that point, the complainant has two choices. They may choose to not file a formal complaint and the process ends there. They can still get help, but they don't do a formal process. Or they may choose to file a formal complaint, which initiates this formal investigation process. If they choose to file a formal complaint, the Title IX coordinator then conducts an investigation, or they talk to anybody who might know something, they collect evidence, and they also then will notify the respondent, and this is the alleged perpetrator, to get their experience and their side of the story, and also to offer them supportive measures. They are both offered the same measures under Title IX, okay? So after they've collected all of this different evidence for the investigation, there is a live hearing that takes place. And both parties have an advisor of their choosing. So they may choose to hire an attorney or to bring someone. If not, Tech can appoint someone who will be their advisor. And the advisors can cross-examine all parties, including the complainant and the respondent. So this live hearing, they don't all have to be in the same room, but it does have to happen live. So they could be in different rooms and Zoom broadcasted to one spot. That way, if the complainant and the respondent aren't comfortable being in the same space, they don't have to sit in the same room. An external decision maker, so an external person to Tech, is the final decision maker who says whether or not the respondent violated campus policy. And if they did, they determine the sanctions. Both parties may appeal the decision either way. This process, there's no set time limit anymore for how long universities have to complete this. So the guidelines say that they should be doing it as quickly as possible. This process, a lot of students will expect, oh, if I report it, the perpetrator will be kicked off campus next week. That is not the case. This process typically takes several months to happen from start to finish. The best thing, though, is that a student can get these supportive measures whether or not they choose to file a formal report. So even if it gets to Title IX, we can always reassure students that even if the Title IX coordinator calls you, you don't have to report it if you don't want to, because so many folks are really worried about that. So supportive measures can really vary, but on the slide, you'll see some of the different options that Title IX has offered in the past and that could be arranged. So they could move classes, they could move housing, they could even get folks security escorts on campus, potentially could help get some deadlines extended in all of your classes because, of course, the trauma might be making it difficult for them to get work done in a timely fashion, or even get a leave of absence or incompletes if they need it. And again, these supportive measures are available to both parties, not just to the victim or complainant. Okay? So again, please use the chat if you have questions. But in the past, all of us, or many of us, were required to report instances of power-based violence to Title IX. That is no longer the case, okay? Under Title IX, most of us, except for people who are called officials with authority, most of us do not have an obligation under Title IX to report. The 4 exceptions to that are the officials with authority. Those people are the president of the university, the Title IX coordinator, the dean of students, and the associate vice president of human resources. Pretty sure Greg is wearing half of those hats himself right now. The rest of us under Title IX do not have to report if a student tells us that they've experienced violence. However, some of us might have to report something under the Clery Act. So ultimately, whether or not you have to report, it depends. Okay, so what's the Clery Act then? Clery Act is another federal law, and it states that Tennessee Tech as a public university must collect reports and statistics about and make publicly available statistics about crimes that are happening on campus. So it includes any Clery crime, which there are many different ones, but the one that's relevant for today's presentation is that Clery crimes do include sex offenses, and sex offenses is what we're calling power-based violence. So it does include stalking, domestic violence, dating violence, and sexual assault. So if it's a sex offense that happens on text geography, then it's considered a Clery crime. Text geography, of course, is actual campus, so residential halls, academic buildings, public areas on campus. But text geography also includes areas where tech may exercise a significant amount of control. So this includes student organization events, it includes fraternities, it even includes school trips if a school department is taking a trip together. Okay? So if there's a Clery crime happening on tech geography and it's reported to a campus security authority, then it would need to be reported to the Clery officer, who's Greg. Okay? So campus security authorities are those who have significant responsibility for student and campus activities. So this includes deans, chairs, supervisors, coaches, and faculty and staff who may serve as advisors to student organizations. So for example, I am an advisor to the Peer Empowerment Program, which is a student club at the university. So I am a CSA, or a Campus Security Authority. So if I hear about a sex offense, for example, stalking, that happened on text geography, so the stalker has showed up on campus, then as a CSA, I cannot keep this private. I have to report it. But I do not have to report the victim's name. I just need to report the things I know, such as the date, the time, the location, and what happened. So I would need to tell Greg, I was told that a female student is being stalked by a male student, and the stalker has showed up on campus, including at the UC last week. That would be enough for the Clery Act reporting, okay? If there's an immediate threat to everyone's public safety, so for example, if someone came to me and told me they were just sexually assaulted on the walk out to their car, and then the person ran away, that we need to call 911 because there is an immediate threat to other safety. That perpetrator could go and blitz attack somebody else, okay? But if you're being told about something that has happened in the past, you don't immediately need to call police. Instead, you could email and let Greg Holt know, reporting it that way, okay? So ultimately, whether or not you report, it depends. As state employees, we all have always needed to and still need to report if we know about child abuse, vulnerable adult abuse, if we know that someone is going to kill themselves or someone else. We've always had to report those things. That's still true. When it comes to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, you have to report non-identifying information if you are a campus security authority, but that's it. Otherwise, you can keep things private, okay? That being said, I would not broadcast yourself to students as a confidential resource because that implies that you have specific training in advocacy and help. So instead, I would still let people know if I'm gonna have to report, like as a CSA, I would let them know what that looks like. But I wouldn't tell people I'm confidential unless I have specific training to do so. Okay. So even though you're not obligated to report, you of course still can. We've gotten asked that in previous trainings. Can I report it? Yeah, you absolutely could still call Greg and tell Greg, this student came to me and reported this. All that will happen is Greg will reach out, explain their process to the student, and offer them help. So if they don't want to move forward, they don't have to. So you have no obligation under Title IX, but you still could choose to. I know I've thrown a ton of information, and I know that this can be really confusing because Clery and Title IX can kind of intersect in a funny way. So I'm wondering what questions folks have about your reporting obligations. Feel free to mic up or to use the Zoom chat. Okay, if you think of anything, you will not be bothering us. So please go ahead and put it in the chat at any time. And we'll also stick around at the very end. So if you have questions, we can answer them. I'm glad we're learning this part. The reporting obligation is, of course, important. But I'd argue even more important is how to move forward past just what our reporting obligation is. How do we respond to this student in crisis? I'm going to pass the floor back to Erin so that we can start addressing that.
Yes, okay, so we're going to circle back to talking about crisis intervention again. Like I said before, we know you are all wonderful at so many things here at Tech, and we know that some of you may even have been through something similar to what we're talking about today, but that doesn't mean you know what a survivor should do or are qualified to give advice. So we always want to remember the understanding victimization exercise that Jack did with you all earlier. Survivors need the same things we discussed in that exercise. So we need to remember that we cannot fix this for them. Stay in your lane as a teacher and a mentor and a caring adult, but not as an advocate, counselor, or friend. Boundaries are really important. They sometimes go out the window for trauma survivors, but keep in mind that you maintaining your boundaries is very healthy and very helpful, even though admittedly it may not be a survivor's favorite thing right in that moment if they come to you with a disclosure. What you can do is tell students about confidential resources, but do not sign up to be their 2 a.m. phone call. And what I mean by that is we have actually worked with faculty who have given their students their cell number and told them to call at any time. But make sure you do not do this. We have lots of resources that you can refer them to that can do that kind of middle of the night crisis intervention. And also an important thing to remember is to let students know that you will not bring this up again. If a student comes to you with a disclosure, sometimes afterwards they may feel embarrassed after disclosing to you, or they may fear that you might bring it back up to them in class or in front of other people. So it helps them feel safe and secure if you can reassure them and help them feel that sense of safety and a sense of control by letting them know that you won't repeat that to anybody or bring it up to them again. Okay, and so we're gonna get into crisis intervention now. So this little guy, we love this. His cracker is broken. It's just too much for him to bear. And for him, this is a crisis because his regular learned coping skills are not working. So we want you to think about how you would define a crisis. Here at Awaken, we define a crisis as a temporary state of disequilibrium that can be caused by environmental stresses, in which an individual's learned coping mechanisms are proved inadequate. And crisis is very person dependent. So in other words, if my cracker was broken and I couldn't fix it, I would not have a complete meltdown. That wouldn't be a crisis for me, but it is to this little guy. So it's very person dependent what a crisis is to each person. It is not the same for everyone. And we all know that going through an occasional crisis is just a normal part of the human experience. But for a survivor to heal from the crisis they're going through, resolution must occur. And the earlier the intervention is in a crisis, the better. It's better to intervene early on than later on. So our goal in crisis intervention is to help the person to return to their pre-crisis level of functioning. The coping skills that they're using right then in the present moment are not helping when someone is in crisis. What we want to do is to help them utilize coping skills that they have used in the past. So for example, you could say something to them like, what kind of things have helped you to cope in the past when you were extremely stressed? So asking these kind of questions can kind of help us to see what kind of coping mechanisms that they have, and kind of bring to mind what things have worked for them in the past so they can try to use those again. But we also want to assist them in learning new coping skills. So we can say something like, I wonder if you might try taking some deep breaths to help you feel calm. And our goal is to help them to organize and to understand and to manage these really intense and overwhelming emotions that they're having in that moment. And then get them connected to the appropriate resources at TEC, such as the Counseling Center or the Title IX office, the Health Services Center if needed, or the campus police. So we can help them to do this with a few skills, and Jack's going to talk about that in the next few slides. And these skills are safety and security, prepare and predict, and ventilate and validate.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first skill that we often will use when we see a student in crisis to help de-escalate them, we call it safety and security, okay? So this one is really, first and foremost, are we physically safe? Are we emotionally safe? And how can we connect you for more safety resources, okay? So let's say we have a student come into our office or our office hours and ask if they can talk to us. They tell us that they've experienced some form of power-based violence. Again, we're first going to use that mini script that Erin gave us, saying something like, I'm so sorry that this happened and I'm really glad you told me. It's something simple, but it shows empathy and it lets them know I'm listening. Then it is perfectly okay to ask them, I'm wondering if you feel safe right now. Because with forms of power-based violence, there is a chance that their physical safety is that they're not physically safe in your space right now, okay? So 9 times out of 10, when you ask a student who's disclosed, are you safe right now? They're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm safe right now, the person's not here. Then we can move on and keep doing different emotional validation and all these different other tools we're gonna talk about. If they say no, let's not talk about their feelings. Let's figure out what we need to do to get them safe. For example, is there a chance that this person is going to show up and hurt them? If so, do we need to get to the police? Is there a chance this person is going to show up? And if so, should we have something that, like a code word that we can switch and, pretend we're talking about a paper? They will know their situation best. And so follow their lead and ask them if they feel safe. If they don't, what can we do to help you get safe in this moment? Okay, and address safety first. Again, most of the time, physically, they're going to say they're safe in your space right now. We can move on to other things. So we first want to ask them if they're safe, but then we also want to physically help them to feel space in our office. So a couple nonverbal things we can do. One, don't block the door. If you're standing in front of the exit, that's a nonverbal way of saying they can't leave whenever they want. And for some of us, that might not be a big deal. But for example, if they're experiencing an abusive relationship, that might be something that's happening at home with that abuser, right? And so it's really important that we keep our exits open. So for example, if I had a door right behind me and this is how I normally sat, I might switch the way I'm sitting so that it's more open, just as a nonverbal way to show them you can leave anytime, okay? Another thing, you might want to close the door when you're talking to the student, but I wouldn't just close the door or slam the door, because again, that might be startling. So instead, it might be better to say, hey, I'm wondering if you want to close that door so that we, keep the conversation private, and give them the opportunity to make sure that's safe for them. One other thing is we want to make sure we're at the same level. I don't know if any of you have ever talked to someone when, for example, like you're sitting and they're standing right next to you. It's just really uncomfortable. They're kind of hovering over you. So it's important to get on the same level as this student. If they're sitting, grab a chair. If they're in a wheelchair, take a knee or pull up a chair so that you can be at the same level. If the student starts pacing in your classroom, don't pace with them. but probably a good idea to stand somewhere in the middle of their pacing. That way, again, you're not like sitting like you're disinterested, you're still on the same level, but you're not pacing with them and adding to their anxiety. Okay, so physically, are we safe, and how can we non-verbally show you that you're safe in this space physically? The next thing we want to do is attend to their emotional safety needs. And a lot of the ways we can do this is by showing them that we are actively listening to them and providing assurance. So please use the Pear Deck and type in what's some ways you could show the student that you're listening to them while they're talking. So any ways you could show this person while they're disclosing that you're actively listening to help them feel safe talking to you. We're going to go ahead and start looking. It's okay if you're still typing though. Eye contact. Yeah, so I get a lot of questions about eye contact because, well, what about, in different cultures? Because of course, cultures handle eye contact differently, right? So I think a good rule of thumb, since we don't have as much time as, to dive into cultural competence and to talk about all of these different, a really good rule of thumb is to model what they're doing. So if they are making no eye contact with you, they are never looking at you, please don't stare at them because that's going to probably make them feel more uncomfortable. Instead, maybe you pick a spot kind of like on your desk and you look at it and then you occasionally glance up at them to kind of check in. They're making a lot of eye contact, again, follow their lead. They're more comfortable with eye contact, so you can make more, okay? But yeah, absolutely, that we're looking at them, that we're nodding. I always think about like the joke of the social worker head tilt and nod, right? That we're showing them, yes, I'm intrigued, I'm listening, I care. Maybe we're smiling. Yeah, when appropriate to do so, right? Like if they're telling you something horrible, don't smile that, yes, this happened, but it's okay to smile and be human and respond, right? Turning off your cell phone. Yeah, set your phone aside, set your computer to the side and actually look at them and focus on them. Probably not a good time to have your mouse and be looking the other way and, checking your email. Another one, positioning your body so it's open to them. Absolutely, it's really subtle. It makes a big difference, right? Having that open body language and leaning in or back with them, okay? Great. So we're going to be doing these things while they're talking to show them that we are listening, we are here, we are a safe person to talk to because we're going to just receive this. Okay. So the next thing with safety and security is something that Erin mentioned. Something that can be helpful to do is to help figure out what coping skills they have. So for example, let's say we have a student saying, I'm sorry, professor, I'm really struggling in your class. I'm not sleeping at night because I was sexually assaulted and I'm having horrible nightmares about it. Still do our script. I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so glad you told me. I'm wondering if you feel safe right now. As we're talking, we might say, I'm hearing that you're having trouble sleeping. I'm wondering if anything's worked for you in the past when you had that trouble. Now, again, we've let them know we're listening and we're trying to get a sense of, do you have any coping skills right now? The best thing about this is it's a really good spot to refer them in a way that seems caring, not like just call the counseling center where they're going to feel dismissed. Instead, you can say, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk to the counseling center because I know they have a lot of great resources to help trauma survivors sleep. Okay, so it's a good way to show that there is help available and I can connect you to the next place for more help. Okay, another thing with coping skills is we want to kind of warn you. If you have a student disclosing, you might see or they might tell you about some really unhealthy coping skills they've got going on. Really, really common for survivors to be cutting themselves, burning themselves, to have suicidal thoughts, to be excessively using substances to try to numb the pain, or even to have really increased promiscuity, especially the sexual assault survivors. They might be going around and sleeping with anybody, okay? These things can seem really concerning to us, but it's important that we still monitor our face and we don't respond with judgment because then we're going to shut them down and we're going to make them, not feel comfortable getting further help. So it's important to monitor our face and our reaction. And it's really important not to blame them or judge them or say things like, well, don't do that. Because what if that's the only coping skill they have? For example, what if cutting themselves is the only coping skill they have? And all we do is tell them, don't do that. Now we've taken away the only coping skill they have. And albeit it's not the healthiest coping skill, but if it's the only one they have, we still don't want to take it away. So instead, that might be a better opportunity to say, I'm hearing that you're hurting yourself and I'm really concerned for your safety. Can we walk up to the counseling center together and get you connected to somebody who can help you try other coping skills that might work? So again, it's not your job to fix it or to find them coping skills, because I realize it's probably not everyone's expertise on this call, but it is a really great referral point and a good opportunity to still make sure we're not judging them or reacting in a yucky way. The next tool of crisis intervention is my personal favorite. We call it prepare and predict. This one is really that we all feel safer when we know what to expect, right? This is like if we're going to a party, we all want to know, what should I wear? Who's going to be there? What are we going to eat? It's the same thing for survivors. They might feel more comfortable if you help explore different options with them. So for example, maybe throughout this conversation where they've disclosed to you, you could say something like, hey, I'm wondering if you've considered reporting this or getting medical help. They might not even be recognizing that they have those options because they might kind of have that tunnel vision going on. So it's totally appropriate for you to let them know different options they have. And then it can be really helpful for you to explore what those options might look like. So you could say something like, I'm wondering if you've considered reporting this. Can I tell you about the Title IX process at the university? Now we've given them an opportunity to have control over the conversation because they can say yes or no. If they say yes, that gives us a great opportunity to tell them what we know about Title IX. So we could tell them our Title IX coordinator, his name is Greg Holt. We could call him together. He could explain the whole process. And if you choose, you could get some help, like moving classes around or deadlines extended. And he can also explain what the formal reporting process is like if you want to consider that. What's really important about this is if you don't know, don't lie. You don't know a process, say, I don't actually know what that looks like, but we could call this person or we could find out together. Really important that we don't paint this pretty picture that's a lie. So we don't want to make promises that we cannot keep. For example, I would never say, let's call Greg Holt, he's in Title IX, your perpetrator is going to get kicked off campus. Even if I'm pretty sure that that's what's going to happen, I don't have control over it, so I am not going to make that promise. Because if I'm wrong, I have just, again, been another person that the survivor couldn't trust. Right? So don't make promises, but help explore different options and what they may look like. The more information you can give about the good, the bad, the ugly, the more equipped that student might feel to access that resource. Right? And this is something we can all really be doing every day by having clear rubrics, clear deadlines in our classes. You have trauma survivors in your class. I guarantee you definitely have some. So the more clear expectations you can put forth, the better it helps folks who have experienced trauma. Okay, and the last tool of crisis intervention is probably the one that you're going to use the most often, and it's called validate and ventilate. Going back to that understanding victimization exercise, many of us talked about how this is what we wanted. We wanted somebody who would listen, believe us, and support us, okay? So that's really our role for students as well. Excuse me. So first and foremost, we would love to let them vent, let them talk. If you're not in a private location, like if they blurt this out in the middle, at the end of class in the middle of the classroom, it would be appropriate to say, hey, I'm wondering if you want to come talk over here or do you want to go back to my office? But if they're choosing to blurt it out there, that's fine. So letting them talk as much as you can, giving them that attention while they talk, right? Putting our phone down and paying attention to them. Then we want to provide them that assurance. They might have been told, no one will believe you. This is your fault. You're crazy. So assurance is really letting them know, I don't think you're crazy and I don't think this is your fault. So the way we do that is by validating their feelings, okay? So often we'll use these active listening tools. So we might say things like, I hear you saying you're overwhelmed. It sounds like you're terrified. So again, we're going to use these to make sure that students know, hey, we're listening to you, and this is what I'm hearing that you're feeling. So let's say Aaron and I are talking and Aaron's telling me, something has happened, and I say, it sounds like you're angry. If Aaron goes, I'm not angry, I'm heartbroken. This is still a good thing. Even though I got the feeling wrong, Aaron would know that I'm listening to her, that I care about her, and we still have helped acknowledge and figure out how is she feeling, which when we're in crisis can be one of the best ways to de-escalate, right? Is to identify feelings and to help feel seen and heard, okay? So that's our job, is to validate, to listen, let them vent, and then to validate the feelings that we're hearing. Something you can do is literally just parrot back what they just said to you. So if I have a student saying, I think I did really badly on that exam, I just can't focus, I can't stop thinking about the assault. You would say, you couldn't focus during that exam at all because you can't stop thinking about the assault. I literally haven't added anything, right? But I've let them know I'm listening. And by doing that, I've provided that assurance that you're not crazy because I see you. I see you and I hear you. Okay? So we're going to validate the heck out of their feelings with one exception. When you hear them blaming themselves, we are not going to validate that it's their fault because it's not. So then we might say something like, I hear you blaming yourself, but this is not your fault. No matter what you were doing, nobody had the right to hurt you. Okay? So we're going to watch a quick video, and it's kind of a silly one, but it addresses this crisis intervention. So I want you to listen for what does this woman need?
It's just
Sound working so far? Okay, cool.
it's just there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way.
So kind of a silly video. But again, the same thing, she needed somebody to just listen, right? She didn't need this person to fix it for her. She just needed someone to listen and be there and provide some empathy. That's our role with students. We don't need to fix it. We need to receive and be a safe sounding board that can then connect them to experts who can help them further. Okay?
Video never gets old. I laugh every time. Okay, so crisis intervention do's and don'ts. So what we have alluded to earlier is we do always want to follow the survivor's lead. We don't want to rush them. And we always want to remember what Jack just talked about in the vent and validate slide, and also in the victimization exercise of what we needed when we were in a similar situation. We want to let them vent and validate their feelings. We do not want to give advice, because advice implies that you know better than the person, but really they know their self and their own situation best. So instead we focus on listening, and we focus on safety and security, prepare and predict, and ventilate and validate, like we just talked about. Another really important thing that you'll see here on the side, the right side of the slide, is questions. We do not want to question the survivor. This can feel very judgmental, very blaming and shaming. For example, sometimes people ask questions like, why did you go there? Or why did you drink that much? Or what were you thinking? Or how could this have happened? So that is very, feels very blaming and shaming to the victim, like it was their fault. So just a little bit about the basics of trauma-informed care. As educators, you all know that if you teach humans new skills, they need to practice them so that they'll actually be able to use them. So before we go on and practice these new crisis intervention skills that we're talking about, and the disclosure response skills, we're going to first touch on one last really important topic, and that's trauma-informed care. We want to keep in mind that a good trauma training is at least 4 hours long. So obviously we don't have time for that today, unfortunately, but we do really encourage you to seek further training on trauma. As we talked about, you most likely have trauma survivors in your class right now and do every semester. But for this training, the basic idea that we want you to remember as we're going through the exercises is that the basic idea of being trauma informed is shifting your thinking from what is wrong with this person when we see someone in crisis or distress, and instead shifting to what happened to them. That's a very significant shift, not what's wrong with them, but what happened to them that's causing them to behave this way or act this way or have these symptoms. It's a really important shift. So with that in mind, we're going to practice. So I'm going to tag Jack.
This is such a shift. It's wild. My partner is an elementary school teacher, and the amount of times you'll hear other teachers saying, "What's wrong with this student? Why are they so disrespectful?" or "Why are they this or that?" And then after you get to know the student, you find out, that domestic violence is happening at home, or a parent is incarcerated, or they've lost a family member. And so it's like these kiddos are dealing with trauma. Same with our students, right? Maybe if they're reacting poorly or not acting the way we want them to, maybe nothing's wrong with them. Maybe something's happened, right? And so that's really just way more empathetic mindset, acknowledging that maybe they're going through something and we can have a little empathy. So yeah, as Erin said, we get to do some practice, which also means it's time for memes. So if you are a meme appreciator, you're welcome. You'll like these. I know that this might feel awkward and hard at first, but that's why it's important that we do it, because I'd rather you practice and feel awkward and have this be difficult as a group of faculty and staff while we're learning together than when a student is disclosing in your office and you're going, "Oh my God, what do I do?" Right? So in this first round of practice, it's a lot lower stakes. We're going to use Pear Deck to practice. You don't have to talk, you just have to type. So we'll give you a scenario, and you're going to use Pear Deck to type back what you might say or do to respond to this student. So it might be helpful for you to literally type a quote that I would say this. I would say, "I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so glad you told me." And then to bullet point some other resources or action items you might do. So for example, I might bullet point that I'm eventually going to refer them to the counseling center. And since I'm a CSA, I'm eventually going to have to report non-identifying info to Greg. Okay, so Erin's going to walk us through an example, and then you guys will get some opportunity, or y'all will get some opportunity to practice via Pear Deck. Oops, we skipped.
Okay. So on this first one, I'm just going to read through and show you what we're looking for. So say if a student came to you and said, "I am so anxious and I feel like the entire world is imploding." What we would want you to do is to use the Pear Deck and put what your response would be to that person. So here we have examples like, "I hear that you're anxious and overwhelmed. You're not alone, and I'm glad you reached out for support." And then listing some of the resources that we've given you to refer them to. So that would be an example of what we're looking for in the Pear Deck responses. And this next one, I'm going to just walk you through also. And we're going to use the Pear Deck in this one for our responses. So imagine that one of your students comes to your office hours, and while you're talking about grades and grad school, they disclose to you that they cannot apply at any other university because their partner is very controlling and will not let them. So please use your Pear Deck and just type in what your response would be to that person. And like Jack said, maybe some bullet points of some resources you might give them. Okay, so we'll give just another minute we'll start looking at the responses. Okay, looks like we have a few coming in, so let's check them. See that some of you are still typing. Let's see. I understand that you feel you have to apply for grad school at this institution. Would you like to talk to someone at the counseling center? Yep, that's really great. You're validating their feelings and then referring them to resources. I'm hearing you say that your partner will not let you apply elsewhere. This could be power-based violence. Would you like to discuss this at the counseling center? Again, great. Really acknowledging and validating and then referring. Okay, I'm hearing that your partner is keeping you from applying to other universities. I'm glad you told me. I can recommend some resources. Excellent. Again, same thing. Excellent responses. We really validating using some of those active listening skills and then referring to appropriate resources. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to walk through another one and use the Pear Deck with it. So in this one, a student comes to class. She apologizes for being late. She starts to tell you that when she was at a fraternity party the weekend before, she had too much to drink. And while she was incapacitated, a male student at the party separated her to a bedroom and proceeded to attempt to undress her and would not take no for an answer. So eventually she stopped fighting back and she froze. And then she said her words, she says she allowed him to have sexual intercourse with her. She insists that what happened was actually her fault because she chose to drink too much and because she did not fight back. So what would your response be? You can type it into Pear Deck again, what you feel your response would be to this student. And we'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, if you're typing still, continue to type, but we're gonna just take a quick peek and see what our responses are here. I'm so sorry this happened to you. None of this is your fault. You are a victim and we have resources to help you. I really like that right up front on this one, you said that none of this is your fault because the person, when they're disclosing, is really blaming themselves a lot. So that's wonderful. And then it looks like referring to resources. Again, same thing. I'm very sorry for what happened. This is not your fault. That's awesome. This one I like too because I hear that you went to a party last weekend. So you're really, like Jack was saying, kind of parroting back what the person told you. And I hear you blaming yourself, but it wasn't your fault. Great, right up front with that. And you should be able to attend parties without that happening to you. It was that person's choice to hurt this person. It was not their fault for going to a party. Again, it was not your fault. Let me give you some resources to help you cope. Okay, so this one is good. This person needs to report to Clary, and they right up front tell the person, but assure them that they won't report their name. That's an excellent way to deal with it right up front. Okay, some more. This is not your fault. Great job. And I like on this last one too. I'm wondering, do you want me to report this to Title IX? Acknowledging that you do not have to report it to Title IX, but you're willing to help this person if they want to do that, and leaving the decision up to them, which gives them back that power and control over what's happening. So that's great too.
Now we've got a dream team today, Erin. Y'all are the first crew. So this is our third time doing this, and y'all are the first crew where somebody realized I have to report this, but not with their name. So normally we have to ask this. Indeed, if you are a CSA, so if you're a faculty advisor for a student, or if you're a dean, if you're a chair, you do have to report this to Clery. So it's not a question or a choice for the student. So it's a good thing to let them know. You have to, of course, because it's one of those sex offenses. And it happened at a fraternity party, which is tech geography. So in our call or email to Greg, we could say, I heard that a female student was sexually assaulted by a male student at a fraternity. You can tell him the name of the fraternity if you know it, but you don't have to. And that would be the end of your report, is telling him like when and where if you know. Okay. So great work on the lower stakes practice. We're going to up the stakes a little and do some more practice. And so to do more practice, we're going to use the breakout room feature of Zoom. So I'll put you in breakout rooms and you'll either have 2 or 3. One group will have 2. Most groups will have 3 people in your breakout room. Right when you get to the breakout room, you're each going to decide who is person A, who is person B, and who is person C. And I'm sending scenarios in the chat right now. So all of us can open each one of these links, okay? So let's say Aaron and I get put into a breakout room. We would right away, we'd both have these open on our computer and we'd decide, hey, Aaron, do you want to be person A and I'll be B? Then the other person can get rid of the other scenarios. And then we will go ahead and practice one of the scenarios. So let's say first that Aaron would be the pretend student survivor and I would be the pretend faculty staff member responding to a disclosure. And Erin would choose one of the scenarios given to her on that sheet to act out. And I, again, would act out how I might respond. Okay, the third person will keep time and give them about a minute and a half to practice and then interrupt them and say, time. Then in about 30 seconds, give feedback. Say, hey, that was great that you gave this resource. Maybe next time you should be careful. You kind of sounded like you were judging them. Or, give feedback that's constructive. And then switch so that everybody gets a turn being the survivor and everybody gets a turn providing crisis intervention and support. So I know that this can feel confusing for folks. So Aaron and I are going to model what this might look like. So we're going to have Aaron be the survivor and I will be the staff person who's providing support. And Aaron, if you want to give them the scenario.
Okay, yeah, so our scenario is that we're in line at Starbucks before class. I'm the student, Jack is the professor, and I see her in line ahead of me at Starbucks. So I'm going to approach her. So, hi, Professor Jack, how are you?
Hey, Aaron, good to see you. How are you?
Good. I'm really glad I ran into you because there's something I really wanted to ask your advice about.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to grab our coffee and grab a table?
Oh, yeah, that would be great. Thank you, because it's kind of private.
Okay. All right. And you said, yeah, what's going on, Aaron? You said you wanted to talk?
Well, again, it really doesn't have to do with class, but I just respect your opinion and I just, I don't know who else to ask, so I just need some advice.
Okay, you need some advice. You're not sure what to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do. Well, like I said, it's kind of personal. So I have this boyfriend and like he's not abusive or anything, but he's never hit me before, but just we argue a lot and he gets mad at me a lot. Like there's things I do that upset him and sometimes he drinks too much. And we were at a party at his fraternity this past weekend and we were arguing and he was really mad at me and he actually hit me really hard on the side of his head and on my head and I didn't know what to do because he never did that before and I just kind of froze and I don't know what to do. I'm kind of scared.
Aaron, I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so glad you told me and that you felt safe to come to me with this. I'm wondering, like, are we safe here now or do we need to move to a different spot where he wouldn't come?
I think we're safe right now because he's not around, but if he did come, I would just pretend we were talking about a paper or something.
Okay, I'll follow your lead. If you start talking about our paper, I will just jump in and talk about our paper too. But I'm hearing that he physically hurt you, and I'm worried about you, Aaron. I really care about you, and I want to make sure you're safe. I'm wondering if in the past if this has ever happened before.
He's yelled at me a lot in the past, but that's the first time.
Wow.
But I'm worried it may happen again, though.
Yeah, I hear that you're anxious and worried about your safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm definitely not an expert in this. I'm really glad you told me. But we have a lot of really great offices on campus where there really are experts on this stuff. The one that really comes to mind first is the counseling center, because I know they have a lot of training about how to handle this sort of stuff. Have you ever heard about our counseling center at Tech?
I've heard about going there or calling them, but I've been nervous to do it by myself. Would you go with me?
Yeah, totally. It's in the UC, so we could walk upstairs together, or I could help you call and we could see if they have open appointments. Before we go up there, and I do want to let you know one thing, because I'm a staff member, I'm what's called a campus security authority. You don't need to remember this or anything, but I want to let you know I have to report non-identifying information. So I do have to tell somebody about this, but I don't have to give them your name unless you want me to give them your name.
Well, thanks for telling me that. No, I don't think I want them to know my name. So if you need to report it, I understand, as long as my name's not in there.
Yeah, no, totally. You don't have to report it. Absolutely not. I'll just give without your name. In the meantime, do you want to grab our coffee and walk up to the counseling center, and we can see if we can get you in for a session?
Yeah, thank you for doing that for me.
And we'll stop there. Of course, these scenarios are probably not normally just a minute and a half, 2 minutes, right? This might go on for a while, but I don't want you all to have to sit and watch us for 15 minutes. But I'm wondering what questions folks have. You can think about how this might be different than what we might have normally done, right? I feel like in my experience, I've worked with a lot of students whose faculty have instantly said, you need to break up with this person and you have to report it. Let's go right now, right? And they kind of get tense and scared. We really want it to be survivor-led and connect them to resources and show them how much we care. One thing that I'm already noticing I missed and really want to make sure we try to do is letting Erin know, hey, I'm not going to bring this up again. If I see you in class, I'm going to pretend I don't know, not because I don't care about you, but because I do. And I don't want to out you to anybody that you don't want to know. That being said, Erin, can you think of other things that might have been helpful or that folks could do?
No, I think that was great. I mean, validating feelings, and asking if I felt safe, connecting me to resources, offering to go with me, and calling. A lot of times students may know that there's those resources, but it's a big step and they might be scared to do it on their own. So calling with them or offering to walk up with them, like Jack said, is really great and can be really helpful.
We're going to have practice. We'll put you in breakout rooms. If you want to open the resource sheet I sent you via email, if that's helpful for you to have it open, go for it. And it's in the email with the Zoom link for today. So again, first and foremost, decide who's going to be which person, and then take turns practicing out the scenarios. And Erin and I might pop in and out just to eavesdrop. Just ignore us. We'll turn our camera off. We won't talk. We want to listen how great you are. And we will send like one of those announcements over Zoom when it's time to come back as a big crew and do some reflection and some final wrap up things before we're done. Okay, without further ado, I gotta do these fancy breakout rooms again. Coming back, that's good. That's not always the case. Sometimes I think people are mad at us when they come back. I'm glad to see y'all are smiling still. All right, I think this is our whole crew. Erin and I were texting as we were eavesdropping about how wonderful you all are. Because, oh my gosh, I know this is awkward and it's intimidating to get thrown in a room over Zoom and to just have to practice. But you were doing so well. And our students are so lucky that they have so many faculty who would take time, faculty and staff who would take time out of your crazy busy schedules to come and learn and practice. Because all of you, every single one of you, every single scenario I heard, I was like, oh, I would feel comfortable with a survivor telling this person because I can tell this person cares. So we want to pause and have a moment of like reflection and questions, because I know and anticipate that some of these might have been challenging, or you might have some, oh, what should I have done? All of the scenarios that y'all saw are things that we've had happen in survivors we've worked with on our campus at Tech. So they're real. Which I saw, yeah, I see faces like, yeah, that's sad that that's happening here, right? But we didn't make these things up. These things could happen. So what questions did you have, or what reflection do you have from that experience? Feel free to use your mic or to put in the chat, whatever's more comfortable for you.
Well, just in general, when you said we were going to breakout rooms and we were going to practice these scenarios, I was like, this is a really small group. I can't just can't jump ship. But I do think the scenarios are helpful, to actually have the words coming out of our mouths, and we have to think on our feet and try to, try to get, try to do those things that you've talked about. So even though I hate it, it's all part of a good education. So keep it up.
Yeah, totally. I know it's so awkward, and I see your guys' faces like you're gonna make us practice, but it really does help. You think you know what to say, and then when you actually have to do it, it's hard. And so better for it to be hard with all of us than when a student's sitting in front of you in crisis. Absolutely. What else from y'all? You guys can tell students hate me in trainings because I do the really long pause and stare, like I'm sure many of you do in your classes, right? Until they get so awkward that they're like, fine, I'll answer, just stop. I'm so impressed, and I'm so glad you took the time. I know you're busy. So we just have a couple of things while we're wrapping up about how we can all get prepared now. Because of course, if someone comes to your office or tells you these things, you're ready to respond. But what things can we all be doing preemptively to make sure that we're promoting a safe and inclusive campus? So I will warn you, I'm going to try to screen share, but this is usually where my Zoom decides that it's going to just kick me out. And if it does, Erin is well equipped to keep going, and I'll be back. But if you have questions, still please interrupt us at any time. But I'll pass the floor over to Erin to talk about secondary trauma and self-care.
Okay, so yeah, we want to talk about secondary trauma, which is a very real thing. And this can happen when individuals receive disclosures of sexual violence. We have heard reports from professors or staff who are so affected by disclosures they've gotten that maybe they keep thinking about that person, they're having trouble sleeping at night, they keep replaying it in their head. Oh, here we go, work check. It's really, really important if you receive a disclosure to take really good care of yourself afterwards. And it's really important to remember that self-care is not just mani-pedis and bubble baths like people talk about. It can just be things simple enough as like getting a break from work, getting some rest, getting out in the fresh air and sunshine, getting some exercise, or just spending time with loved ones. Sometimes it's talking to a professional. I want to direct your attention here on the slide to the Employee Assistance Program. The phone number and the website are there. This is a free resource that is available to you all that can help connect you with counseling or other services when you're feeling overwhelmed by secondary trauma, when you've received a disclosure. And again, nobody needs to know that you've used that. It's completely confidential. So we really do encourage you to take advantage of that if you feel like you're feeling the symptoms of secondary trauma, if you're having trouble after receiving a disclosure. And just really make sure to take care of yourself. Do whatever brings you joy and rest. And like the picture says there on the slide, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's really important to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, Erin, I'm so glad you're talking about that, because I mean, obviously, even Erin and I doing this work and receiving disclosures, some of them stay with you. I mean, we come to really care about the students on our campus and the students in our class, and to know that one of them has experienced this, it might impact you. And that doesn't mean that something's bad. In fact, I would argue that that means you really care a whole lot. But please get help, because it's too heavy a burden to carry on your own. So absolutely get some support and resources for yourself. Another thing that we can all start doing now is spread the word about resources. I've had students tell me that resources on our campus are the best kept secret. That is not a good thing. We do not want resources to be a secret. We want them to be so readily available for students and so accessible. And so something that we all can start doing. Oh, yeah, I see that you have your hand up, Lori, with that.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to, I just wanted to go back to the secondary really quickly. Since I've been here since the Jurassic era, I have had students before um, who have had the secondary trauma, I think, of having had it reported to them, and then they have reported it to me. And so I have done what you suggested and had them, suggested that they needed to go to the counseling center. But I wanted to just follow up and ask you what I think that I may not be um, completely correct in my mind on what I need to do from a reporting standpoint. So if a student comes to me and says, for instance, I'm worried that this may have happened to my roommate at, for instance, a fraternity party, um, could you just clarify for me, in addition to what I need to say to them from a secondary trauma standpoint, um, because that's a secondhand report, how exactly it's only happened a few times in my 20 years, but, and I know that I did follow up and report, but can you just walk me through the specifics because it's a secondhand report, and I'll mute now. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So because they don't want, so Title IX, no reporting obligation under current policy, but as a campus security authority, it doesn't matter if it's secondary or from the survivor, report it in the same way, because there could have been a campus crime. And Greg Holt would ultimately be the one who would make the decision of whether or not we'd include it in our campus security annual report. So when in doubt, call Greg and report. But even if it's a secondary report of this happened to my friend, still make that query report so you don't need the survivor's name. And I would still tell the friend, hey, just so you know, I have to report, but I won't have you or your friend's name. The reason that I think it's a good thing to let them know is this doesn't happen often, but you might recall a time at Tech where we've gotten a timely warning. And that's where we all get an email or a TTU alert saying, such and such happened on campus, avoid that area. If there is an immediate threat to campus safety, the university has to send one of those out. So if for some reason they decided that they needed to send out a report, I don't want the student to tell you and then leave your office and get a text saying this happened. And they're like, how did they know? I just told Dr. Maxwell, why did she tell? Right. And so I'd still let that secondary survivor know. But yeah, reporting's the same. I'm glad you asked because it happens so often. When our students are hurt, they tell their friend first. They don't tell us, they tell their friend.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, so syllabi disclaimers, we would love for you to add something if you're a faculty member to your syllabus about campus resources. If you are a mandated reporter, you could put that if you had, if you were one of those 4 Title IX reporters, or if you're a campus security authority, you could put that to let them know ahead of time that there's certain things you would have to report. There's a free sample one that you can steal off our website, so I have our link on there. You go to tentech.edu/awaken. There's a tab that's called Don't Cancel That Class. And it's a bunch of faculty resources. So it's on that faculty resource page. Really, the whole idea of this, though, is just to give a syllabi spot where resources are being plugged so that students know they're available. Along the same lines, though, we would encourage each of you to be ready to provide resources. Throughout the whole presentation, we've been saying warm handoff, warm referral to resources. In order to send students to resources, you really need to know them, right? And so for your convenience, we've attached a couple different things to that email that had the link today. You'll also be getting a follow-up email this afternoon that has the same resource sheet. So there's 3 different ones. There's an image of a resource sheet, a PDF of the same version, and there's this one that you can see on the slide is also included in a document called Finding Help After Experiencing Power-Based Violence. The reason we have a couple different options, one is just campus, the one that has an image of the PDF, whereas this one you'll see has some community resources as well. I'd encourage you to print this off and have it in your office. That way, if a student comes in, you're not scrambling like, oh, what's that number again? Or what's the name of that office? You can instead say, hey, I have this document. You want me to make you a copy and you can take it. It's got their phone numbers. You're ready, right? This is also something that you have my full permission to share with anyone and everyone. Post it on your iLearn page. If you have a social media account for your office, it can go on there. Anywhere and everywhere that you all want to share it, please, you have our blessing, share with everyone. And if you think of additional resources you'd like us to add, send them our way. We're happy to adapt the Canva document and send it back.
Okay, and so something else we want to mention is that research does demonstrate that power-based violence is rooted in oppression and in disparities that exist in our culture as a whole. So one way we can all help to eliminate violence is by treating everyone as equal. So we encourage you to promote inclusion and to set that norm that everyone here at Tennessee Tech on our campus is safe and respected here. Also, some more homework for you. We want to remember that learning about violence is not a once and done thing. And we all need to be actively engaging and learning and growing in these areas. So we really encourage you to get involved with folks on campus who work with power-based violence and these issues, or in your community as well, both as an individual and as a connector for your students. Something we recommend is that instead of canceling class when you're ill, or you may be attending a conference or something like that, please think about inviting professionals to speak during your scheduled class time, and then maybe provide some extra credit for attendance at their events for your students. Some examples I can bring up quickly are just like the Family Justice Center, the Genesis House, the Women's Center here at Tech, and the Office of Multicultural Affairs. So there's organizations and offices on campus or in our community that you can invite to come speak during your class time when you can't be there. And just in closing, we really want to thank you for your support. We thank you for being here today. We know that this is a very, very busy time and you have very busy lives. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. It really, really demonstrates how much you really do care about our campus and about our students, which is wonderful. None of us can do this alone, but we can all be a part of the solution. And we would be very, very grateful if you can take a minute to fill out our brief feedback survey, which Jack will be emailing and which is also in the chat here on the Zoom. And if you have any questions that we can answer for you, please feel free to stay on the Zoom. Jack and I will hang out for a few minutes afterwards to answer questions or chat about anything you want to chat about. Otherwise, thanks so much for coming, and we hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much. If you have other friends or faculty who you think could benefit, we'd also love for you to encourage them to sign up. We have one more training, or we can send them the link to a recording if that training doesn't work for them. But the more people that are prepared to respond, the better. Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys. This was great.
Great. I'm so glad you were here. Like Erin said, we'll